if anything, you need some robot friends to help keep your sanity, because that is what we're talking about today, because we're talking about Mystery Science Theater 3000. Welcome to The Lore You Know. This is a podcast where three people chosen at random from the world get together and talk about your favorite lore from movies, video games, and sometimes TV shows that are about watching other movies. So that'll be a new one. Anyway,
How innovative.
I am coming at you live, pre-recorded. It is me, CJ.
And I'm Ethan.
And I am back filling in for the role of girl. My name is Liz.
Lizard X Lizard, famous internet person.
Not really, but thank you.
Master of the lore of today's topic, the Mystery Science Theater.
Master of many things, including like Scooby-Doo, Warrior Cats. And then I was on here also not as a lore master to talk about things like Fire Emblem.
That's true.
Sonic the Hedgehog comics.
Well, that's just
a very
because...
wide variety of things that you wouldn't meet many people who know that much about those things.
And if you did, you would not want to speak to them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and now having been in on those episodes, you have become a master of those lores.
True.
Yes, exactly.
You're the poster child for what this show can do for you and how many people you will push away in the process.
If you continue to listening to episodes of The Lore You Know, you could turn out just like me. Abundance of knowledge on niche topics that don't matter.
That would be great. You could also, it's like a 50-50, you could also turn into me, an old, jaded hermit man who just looks at everything and says, "What is the lore here?" And they're like, "Sir, this is a Target. You're buying Kleenex." And I go, "Yes, but why is it called Kleenex and not facial tissues?"
I do like the idea of going to Target and reading like nutrition facts and being like, "This has lore."
All right, new products. We're opening a merch store. It's all food with mysterious lore. It's gonna be really hard to pass the FDA.
Oh my gosh! You know what? You know what? Food product. Quotation marks around product did have quotation marks around food as well. But remember the pink sauce thing?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the pink sauce.
That had the made up nutrition
too.
Facts. That had lore. Now she was ahead of her time.
Yeah, and that turned out great, and everyone was
everyone was happy, and nothing was wrong with that situation.
Ethan, do you want to learn about this TV show made in like a shoestring budget in the middle of Minnesota?
CJ, I feel like I just did a little bit.
What a great
Tell
way
me
to
more.
start. That could not captivate anyone more.
I mean, it captivated a whole generation of people. Did you know, Ethan, that this show has lore? You know?
Not
Did
particularly.
Did you know the lore?
The lore, you know? Ethan, did you know?
I only saw a few episodes of Mystery Science Theater back in the day, and it was not a thing I expected to see on this show.
Yeah, because when you first look at it, you think to yourself, surely there is no lore here. But Lizzie and I have been watching pretty much only this for like a long time. I mean, there's hundreds of episodes.
I will say about this show, when you look at it and your first instinct is, this is a show that does not have lore because it's just kind of a bit.
Right.
That's basically true.
Well, it's like they'll just like talk about stuff, and then you kind of assume, oh, they're just making things up. So, I mean, they're being silly, and sometimes they are, but also there is lore to this universe.
It's like whenever you make a joke that becomes canonical to your life, actually, that's how this show works.
Like when I told people I was a podcaster, and then I had to retroactively make a podcast to make that a reality.
Yeah. I agreed to like one episode, and then he just kept. I gotta prove it to him. We need 50.
We need
Also,
50. We're almost there.
in defense of this show, I would say probably most people who enjoy this show also don't really follow any sort of plot with it either.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
unless they're really into it.
Yeah, I love this show growing up because I'm a comedy person who likes to do commentary stuff. And I did not know that there was lore to this show. I just thought it was a bunch of silly robots talking about silly things.
And it is.
So how much of this show is like intentional lore that they set up on purpose, and how much of it is like they did a joke about a thing and then people loved it so much they're like, yeah, that's actually for real?
Some of that definitely.
Pretty hard to differentiate, honestly.
There was we'll talk about a couple of those examples as we go.
I was gonna
there's
say
definitely times when it's like it definitely seems like they just did a joke and they're like, all right, we're just gonna keep that as a canon thing for the rest of the show. So for those of you who don't know, Mystery Science Theater 3000, also known by MST3K, it's a riff show. So another very famous format of this is like riff tracks, although that is just audio that you listen to at the same time as you watch a movie. But the idea is, it's what you do with your friends when you're watching a movie and you're making your own jokes over the top of it, except the show is just that. And specifically on the show, they play very bad movies. Mm-hmm. And
it really appealed to people like CJ and I who love to just sit and talk through movies with our friends, which I'm sure all our friends really like.
Right, especially when you're trying to like one-up each other for jokes.
Yes.
And then the whole movie just becomes not about that at all. If it's a movie you like, I could see that being annoying. But in these cases, the movies are so exceptionally bad that it basically requires someone making jokes over the top of them to be watchable. And that's a really great way to watch a lot of movies that came out. A lot of them are older and just not very good movies in general.
Honestly,
but some of the movies are newer, and they're still making bad movies.
Newer seasons, they do some newer masterpieces. However, I would like to say Mystery Science Theater 3000 plays a very important role in media history because there's always the type of person about many different subjects who will be like, wow, well, movies back in the day were so much better than they are today. Like, movies were they were perfect. They were at their peak in, whatever decade this person's talking about. And Mystery Science Theater 3000 really proves that the movies those people are probably thinking of, it's just survivorship bias, because there have been a lot of just really horrible, awful things people have made in every century.
Yeah. It's actually not that hard to make a movie, and a lot of people have been doing it, and
just look at the horrible things uploaded to Amazon, because apparently it's very easy to upload a movie you made to Amazon.
Oh, I so want to make a movie and post it up to Amazon.
Get us to 500 do we do likes? Get us 500 poop emojis and we will make our own movie and upload it on Amazon.
So the format of the show is pretty much the same every show. You have an introductory segment, and then they will go in and watch the movie, and that's where you get the famous shot of it's like empty theater seats except for the three of their silhouettes over the movie the whole time. And the three of them are watching the movie and making jokes over it, and then every once in a while they'll cut away to a couple of the host segments in the middle, and that is where our lore will lie for this episode.
It's also a very it's an immersive show in a way, and it encourages you to be immersed in it, because a lot of I would say not every season does this actually, but some seasons start the episode with turn your lights down where applicable.
Yeah.
Like, they want you to be in the theater with them.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a really cute show, and it's a really cozy show. Probably some of the reasons that Lizzie and I vibe with it so much is because a lot of the a lot of the humor, but also just a lot of the mannerisms of the hosts are very Midwestern, because this is a show, one of the few shows made in the Midwest. They do a lot of Wisconsin jokes for pretty much
kind of endless.
For pretty much no reason other than because they think Wisconsin jokes are funny, I guess.
Basically everyone, I'm like, there's no way anyone outside of the Midwest finds this joke funny.
They definitely, I mean, that's the other thing, is they do so many jokes during the show that like not all of them will like land necessarily, and some of them are really specific.
I mean, they'll do such niche things.
Right.
Like they'll talk about like the University of Wisconsin-Madison in like for a joke, or they'll talk about like, wow, this must have been filmed in Green Bay.
Yeah.
So
they'll talk about cheeseheads or whatever.
So pretty specific things like that add a charm if you do know. But if you don't know, I would like to hear from the perspective of people who are not from the Midwest watching that show what they feel about those references.
Are you telling them to tweet at Spices With at the soon-to-be defunct Twitter, and also maybe go to YouTube?
Maybe
instead?
we'll find another way. Maybe comment on YouTube what you think.
Please,
please
use one of your 300 daily views to check in on.
We can't talk about how bad Twitter is every episode. I don't
have
have
a little evolving.
I don't have the bandwidth to care.
We can make fun of Twitter a little bit as a treat, okay?
Right. Well, speaking of making fun of things as a treat, let's talk about the format of the show. So generally speaking, there is a single host, and then that host is accompanied by a subgroup of robots that are that all kind of serve different functions. The host tends to just do most of the show with two other robots, and then there's also just a bunch of them in the background. And all the robots are like puppeteered, so they're all like live action puppets.
Practical effects, baby.
It's very good, and it's all very like it is both made to look like the low budget movies they're making fun of, but it also just is a low budget situation. So they do a lot of like paper craft things to like make stuff which looks really cute. Like now in this age, it's very charming to see like real things that are made, like scale models or whatever, instead of just like a CGI of something.
The thing about it is that when you see props that are clearly all sometimes meticulously handmade, it adds this layer of like, you know how much like love went into creating these things for the show, which I guess just to me, that's what I think anytime I see practical effects in something, that I'm like, this took so much time to hand make this item for this movie. Right. And I think that's way cooler than CGI in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it goes very well with the whole like meta thing of it,
right?
Which I was also enjoying earlier. I was thinking, so the premise of the show is the guy has no friends, so he makes robots to watch movies with him. Right. But you, the audience, have no friends and are watching him watch with friends, so you may also pretend.
The show takes place on a spacecraft known as the Satellite of Love. As much as we looked into why it's called that, there doesn't seem to be any specific reason why it is called the Satellite of Love. But that is where they filmed the show. And
I said that it could be a joke that the abbreviation is SOL.
Right.
Because they're shit out of luck because they're stuck on the Satellite of Love. But I think that's probably not true and just a happy coincidence.
We have
I mean,
again,
it could...
With how many like inside jokes they have, even that they tell to you, I assume a lot of these are just inside jokes to the cast.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's, it could be the same kind of thing also with like how we make fun of our single friend for having the sex loft where he has never once held anyone in his arms.
Right, but that's just sort of ironic. But in this case, I don't know why.
It's just the Satellite of Love.
Yeah, it's just the Satellite of Love.
Mm-hmm.
So the Satellite of Love is a creation made by the evil Dr. Clayton Forrester. He is a mad scientist, and he works for a large corporation called the Gizmonic Institute. And it is his desire to use his mad scientist ways to take over the world. So pretty basic plot so far. So Dr. Forrester teams up with another mad scientist named Dr. Earhart, and the two of them collaborate using the resources of the Gizmonic Institute, create the Satellite of Love, which is the place that they are going to run their experiment. The experiment's name is the Mystery Science Theater 3000. So the name of the show is the name of this evil experiment that these evil doctors are doing. So we're following along so far?
Classic. Yes.
So their plan is to take over the world by finding a movie that is so cheesy and unwatchable that it would drive the viewer insane.
It would break the human spirit.
Thus allowing them to take over the world.
Okay.
And
pretty smart move.
Right.
Because have you seen a bad movie?
Right.
Yeah.
It makes you lose all desire to fight back against fascism, which is why they keep making so many.
Which is
right.
very good point. Oh no.
We were just talking earlier about how the rich see sci-fi dystopias and they're like, I should learn from this.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, that we should keep Mystery Science Theater 3000 as, I guess I would still call it a cult favorite type of thing, that we should keep it that way so that no one is like, actually, that's a good idea to try.
Yeah, we need people
Disney's
making
keep this away from Disney.
We need people making fun of things, or else the world goes to shit. That's what I tell myself to rationalize my behavior like this. They decide that they need a test subject for this experiment, and so they take one of the janitors at the Gizmonic Institute, who's named Joel, and they put him into a rocket ship, and they send him to the Satellite of Love.
Which is in space.
Yeah, which is in space. They are going to do their experiment and show all of these bad movies to him, but Joel is a bit of an inventor. And so he is able to use some of the parts in the Satellite of Love in order to create his robot friends. And as the intro song states, he uses these robot friends to help him keep his sanity for these experiments where they are basically trying to torture him with bad movies. But because he has his robot pals there and they're all making fun of him, he is able to keep his
sustain
sanity.
himself.
This is absolutely one of those things that is like, funny premise 30 years ago, and nowadays feels like bleak commentary.
Well, we didn't mention that the Satellite of Love is inexplicably shaped like a bone.
Yeah.
Like a cartoon bone.
Like a cartoon bone that you would
Does
give
that
a
change
dog.
anything?
Yeah, that's all better.
The best reason we could come up for this, they don't ever say in the show why the Satellite of Love looks like that. But it does always look like that in like pretty much every iteration they have. And the best we could come up with is that in the first season, they do this bit where a bunch of space dogs attack them. And then they're like, why are we getting attacked by space dogs? And then there's the reveal that the satellite they're on just looks like a giant dog bone. And so all of the dogs are like worshiping it like it's an artifact of God. And like, and then that's just the shape of the ship now. Like, that's just kind of how this works.
That just came from a bit. So what we were talking about before about separating like just making a joke and the actual plot, it gets a little muddy.
But it's fun. It's cute. The Satellite of Love is okay. So this is some actual like deep lore that probably even if you do like Mystery Science Theater, you do not know. Originally, Joel. So it's just some background on Joel. He's the show creator, but he's also like the star of the show for the first few seasons. He was like a prop comic who was working in the Twin Cities. And so they were like, hey, do you want to make a show? We're going to make a show that will like utilize your prop comedy. And he was like, yeah, that's great. So that's like the reason there's so much like props, like gags and stuff like that with props is because he just is a prop comic, and like that's the reason why. But if you want the in-universe reason why, it's because Joel he's like a tinkerer. He's an inventor who just happened to be a janitor at this big corporation.
Well, the thing about this is also canon to the lore that Gizmonic Institute, everyone who works there, down to the janitors, are inventors.
Right.
It's just like
the
part
most
of their
innovative
culture.
company. Yeah. So when Joel gets sent up to the Satellite of Love, in the initial pilot episodes, he makes his robot companions, and some of them are familiar, but in the original version of the show, he just had his one companion that he like watched the movies with, and that was Crow T Robot. Crow is, I'm pretty sure his head is constructed with like a lacrosse net or something like that.
I think so.
He's spray painted gold. If you are familiar with the show, you are quite familiar with Crow, as he is one of the staple characters and has been since the first episode. And then in the original version, they also had another robot called Beeper, who was a kind of tin can looking robot who could only communicate with beeps and whistles a la R2-D2. And for some reason, they scrapped that from the original pitch of the show and instead created a new robot that would be more long-running named Servo. And Servo is canonically made up of all of the is made up of a bunch of the parts from Beeper, which is why they share a lot of similar look, especially in the first seasons. But yeah, Beeper was just like a robot that beeps that only Crow could understand, which was probably a funny idea for like 10 minutes, and then they're like, wait, we can't do this for a whole show. This actually sucks.
This is a show about riffing on movies, which you need to talk for.
So I'm assuming it was a real like C3PO R2 thing, but
sure, yeah.
The other main robot that made an appearance in the original version, you're not supposed to say this anymore. This is a bad word. We'll use it because that's what she's called for most of the show, but their robot is named Gypsy, and she is like also part of the ship. She kind of runs the ship. In the original version, I guess it was a running joke for a while that they were trying to figure out if Gypsy was a boy or a girl, because they didn't know, and all that Gypsy could say were like Tyrannosaurus Rex growling sounds, which was very strange.
I saw a clip of it and I was like, oh my god.
It was very scary. She's like... It's like
they really had great ideas for this beginning of this show that they realized quickly, wait a minute.
And so this is all known as season 0. This is the version of the show that aired on like local Minnesota television. Mm-hmm. And so by the time we get to season 1, we are kind of at the format that more people are familiar with. So we have Crow and Servo. And those two
Tom
are...
Servo.
Well, yeah, so by the time they get to, like, I think it's at some point in season 1, Joel decides that he is going to send Servo through robot puberty so he can grow up a little bit, because I guess he was a little too immature. And so when he did that, then Servo decided that he wanted to have a more adult-sounding name. So he decided that he wanted to have the name Tom Servo, and that is the name that he has for the rest of the series. So we have Joel, Crow, and Tom Servo as our three main riffers, and then we have Gypsy, who is in charge of the ship and is kind of is just like a 2 big plastic buckets put together to make a big moving mouth. And she is attached to the ship via a bunch of piping.
She reminds me of like a construction claw.
Yeah.
To like scoop things
like
out,
a
but
big
then
scooper.
Attached to like a vacuum cleaner tube.
Yeah.
If I had not seen this as a kid, I would say that you two are just insane and are just saying crazy fever dream things.
And then there's, of course, the most important robot, which is Cambot. And Cambot is
rarely seen.
Yes.
Because
Cambot
it's
is
the camera.
and it is how we interact through this world. And in the universe, so Joel is talking to the mad scientists, who are referred to as the Mads as the show goes on, and they talk to each other through Cambot. It's kind of implied that Cambot has like a screen on him that they can like use as a monitor, but is also a camcorder that videotapes.
I think it's kind of cute because it's like the audience's Cambot in a way, because they always are talking directly to the camera when they're speaking to like the Mads, but they're implied to be on the other side of the camera, and they'll show us that perspective as well.
So they are, they are in effect talking to us.
And so Cambot is watching them in the in-between parts. Is Cambot also what we're supposed to consider when we're like watching the theater and we see the little like black?
Yes.
Okay,
it's Cambot is the camera in the show.
Sure. So the Mads are just sitting there watching their test subject like riff on movies with his two little robots they made. It's like, well, it doesn't seem to be driving him insane, but it is pretty funny. So I guess we'll keep doing it.
So one of the things that they reference to at some point is the experiment data. So they're doing this for their mad experiment. It's heavily implied that the episode that you're watching is the experiment data that they're collecting for their research. Because at one point I think they said that they like sell the sometimes if they need to make some money, they'll sell the experiment data to people, which is implying that they are selling the TV shows to a TV station for money.
It's more than implied because the episode titles are experiment number blah blah blah.
So so it is basically exactly that. Like they are.
So we're watching their experiment on TV. And you with us?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. No, I mean that's just how real capitalism works. Is like how many of those things
they lean
were
into real capitalism later as the villain.
Right.
Sure.
The only other like main thing that we can set up for kind of the rest of the show here is, like Lizzie said, the entirety of the Gizmonic Institute has this weird, I guess, company culture, but they also have these quote unquote rituals that they all kind of just adhere to. So even though the mad scientists are like evil and trapped Joel on the satellite of love, they do this thing that whenever they greet each other, which would be at the start of the episode, they participate in what's known as the Invention Exchange, which is a ritual that is fostered at the Gizmonic Institute that basically you bring an invention to show the other person so that you can show them how innovative you are. And in the show, the evil doctors are using this as an opportunity to try and steal any good ideas that Joel might have so that they can sell them for money.
Obviously, this all goes back to Joel starting the show with prop comedy.
Yeah.
Right. So He's hey guys, I got a good funny thing I made out of tin cans the other day.
Yeah. So
I mean, like
they put it on the show.
The weirdest, stupidest things.
Right.
You
they're
watch
all just gags.
They're gags.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is functionally that the predecessor to that guy who does the TikToks of here's my dumb inventions that don't do useless things.
Yeah, it is very much like that. Except I like these better because they're shorter. And
one we saw today was literally just
TikTok guy.
It was literally just a bubble fan. Like he took a fan with holes in it and dipped it in.
Yeah, like a geisha fan.
In bubbles and just went like this, and he was like,
waved it and made enough bubbles. The one I saw recently that stood out is those like little like party blowers where it's the little rolled up paper and then you like blow it out. He had that, but he said, this is what I used when I was a child, but now I'm a man. And so he had like a leaf blower and then he put like a big one on the end of that. And then it's just unfurled. It's not like make any noise or anything.
Yeah.
And like that was it. Like that was the whole bit.
Sometimes they're literally just like things that are supposed to be funny already, because I definitely recall an episode where they just had their invention was like glasses that have like the eyes that pop out on springs.
Yeah.
And they were like, whenever you see something crazy, wow.
So
it's just he worked alongside Carrot Top at the science institution.
it's very much that vibe. So the show's all open with these invention exchange. So now if you watch the show and you wonder why they do the invention exchanges, you now know the real reason and the in-universe reason for why they do that. Another important thing about the show is that the intro song to the show basically tells you everything you need to know about the plot of the show. It tells you that Joel got kidnapped by the evil doctors and they shot him into space, and then he used a bunch of the spaceship parts to make his robot friends to help keep him sane while he's watching all the cheesy movies. It also says in the intro sequence that Joel cannot control when the movies start or when the movies end because he used those parts of the spaceship to make his robot friends. So that's why whenever it cuts from the host segments to the movie segments, there's always like an alarm that's going off and they go, it's movie time, it's movie time. It's because they cannot control when that happens. So whenever it happens, it's supposed to like startle them and they have to like rush into the movie theater. And so that is why all their scene transitions are like that.
There is one additional side note is that there is a character known as the Magic Voice, which is like a narrator to us, the viewers, but apparently it's just an actual voice that is on the Satellite of Love that just says things like movie sign in 3, like she announces things.
Just a woman's voice
or she'll
that
say
announces
like
stuff.
Commercial sign.
Yeah.
So like she does announce things sometimes. But like they apparently in some episodes they address her once in a while, and it's revealed that Joel built her.
Yeah. So
But-
Joel built all the robots,
Yeah,
including
so like
the Magic Voice.
So much that's a part of the Satellite of Love is all thanks to Joel, is kind of the takeaway.
Right.
Is when I was a boy, I used to watch Pee-wee's Playhouse, but I'm a man now, so I just built
So,
a bunch
I was
of
gonna
voices
say that
into my
earlier, that this
furniture.
show is like, when you describe it, it's like the way that they address like the viewers and things like that and make you a part of it. It's like a children's show for
Yeah.
adults in
Well,
a
and
way.
it's not like geared towards kids, but they're definitely like a family friendly show. And
I
they
think
get like
they
lots
got-
of letters from kids and stuff.
I think they started out, they weren't trying to be family friendly necessarily, but
Yeah.
like it's not like they weren't super unfriendly
Right.
to kids watching. And
Like, they
so
don't-
because
they don't
they've
cuss or
definitely
anything.
they've definitely in later seasons like gotten stricter on what
Yeah.
they can say and show in
Well,
the
that's-
movies.
I mean, that was also them changing with the times a little.
probably I was gonna say it's probably not just them, it's probably just the world.
Yeah, I mean, if they went hard on shows and such, at that point they would just be any other YouTube channel. So
Yeah.
There is in the Netflix version of the show, there was specifically an episode where Gypsy comes in down from the ceiling in the theater to specifically censor a woman's boobs.
Yeah. So remember, Gypsy's like attached to the ship. Every once in a while during the movies, she will like descend from the ceiling. She like picks
She's
up.
not part of like being in the theater with them,
Right.
but once in a while she appears.
She'll like pick up a mysterious box. I think
The
it's
payload.
Yeah, it's called the payload, and they don't explain what it is
They
or
never
what it does.
explain what it is.
But she has to come pick it up out of the movie theater every once in a while. I assumed it was like test data of some sort, but I don't know. Also, it's important to know for Gypsy later on in the most recent seasons, they did change her name because they became more aware of that, how you're not supposed to use that word. So she is henceforth known as GPC.
And we can call her that too, I would
Yeah,
say.
I
We
would
can
say-
refer to her
I
as
was gonna say-
GPC.
Yeah.
that is what It's better. We realized that Gypsy Danger was a bit of a
We
rough
already
name.
talked about that. And then in the second one, they renamed the robot Gypsy Revenge. It's just
Yeah, that's weird. I will give them the credit that they did that and they found a way to keep her name sounding like basically the same.
right. That's a
except
robot name.
it's GPC.
GPC.
Wait, I was gonna say too though that's important about GPC is that she, in the first, well, the majority of the seasons really, she talks. She's voiced by a man, and she talks in a really funny falsetto. Yeah, and she's like portrayed as being like kind of much slower and a little dim-witted compared to the other bots. Not that any of them are like smart, I would say,
Right.
but there's an in-universe reason for that, which is that she GPC basically like controls and runs most of the higher functions of the satellite of love.
Yeah.
And so she's like exhausting all of her I don't know what the right word would be,
like
but
her
resources to running the satellite of love, which slows her down when you talk to her.
Yeah.
So that's why she is like that. And they really, I think, I don't know what, they never came up with like an in-universe reason for this, but in more recent seasons, she is voiced by a woman and talks normally and is more on par with the other bots in terms of her interactions. So I assume they just were kind of like, maybe we shouldn't have the one female robot be like that.
Well, and they have, I mean, they've changed it a lot over like the newest ones, like the robots' voices will change, which there's like a reason for that within the show. But you know, it functionally means that there's a different person puppeteering them, basically. So they now do have like women do the puppeteering for like Crow. And so every once in a while Crow will have a woman's voice because he has a woman's voice, but in functionality he's being puppeted by a different person now. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk through this. You kind of have all the background, you know, all the characters now that are mostly important,
and you're ready to go through the series of massive changes this show goes through.
Yeah, so it's pretty formulaic when it starts. Which, you know,
I mean,
again,
it remains formulaic.
Well, right, but it had like, you know, it was just like 6 dudes working on this show originally, so it was like there were 3 like on-screen actors in any given show, and then there were the puppeteers for the robots, and then like that was pretty much it. I think everyone who worked on the show did other roles for the show as well. Like if you were a puppeteer, you probably also were in props.
There was tons of bits that would need an extra character once in a while, and it was pretty much always one, like Crow's voice actor or Tom Servo's voice actor or one of the head writers, who we will get to.
Right. All right. Bring us through what's going on here. So there's these 2 evil doctors. They're doing these experiments to try and find a movie that's so bad it will make people lose their will to resist their authoritarian regime.
Now, pretty quickly, I would say maybe a lot of people aren't even familiar with Dr. Earhart, who is like working with Dr. Forrester and helped start this project, this experiment. But Dr. Earhart leaves the show kind of soon into season 1, I believe. And the in-universe reason was they apparently, Joel asked, "Hey, where's Dr. Earhart?" And they show a milk carton with Dr. Earhart's face on it, and they're like, "He's missing," and he just never comes back. So
yeah, I mean, that's usually how business dealings between 2 evil geniuses go.
That actor just left the show, so that was their in-universe reason, and more people are familiar with Dr. Forrester having his underling be TV's Frank.
Yeah. So
Why is he called TV's Frank? Because he's on TV.
Yeah, I looked it up. Dr. Forrester was looking for a replacement for Dr. Earhart, and so he went to a nearby Arby's and found a guy named Frank, and he brought him onto the show. And then once he was on the show for a while, he insisted on being called TV's Frank as an homage to like when you're introduced at like a red carpet and they'll say like TV's Vanna White kind of thing. So yeah, from now for the time being, it is now Dr. Forrester and TV's Frank doing all of this evil
Which is a
stuff.
different relationship because Dr. Forrester and Dr. Earhart were like equals, but Dr. Forrester just had like seniority because he was older, and Dr. Forrester and TV's Frank is more like a mad scientist and his henchman.
Yeah, TV's Frank is not like particularly.
He's just
smart.
a guy.
Yeah,
It's
he's
kind
just
of
some
fun.
dude from
He's just a
Arby's.
guy.
Yeah, when you said the name TV's Frank, I didn't actually think genius in my head.
Yes.
So
Yeah, he's really shown to be Dr. Forrester's underling, and like Dr. Forrester conducts other experiments on TV's Frank as well. So it's a different relationship, but I think was probably better in the long run for comedy's sake.
Yeah. So they're kind of like mirrors of each other, whereas Joel has his robots that he made and he takes care of. Dr. Forrester has his underling that he kind of abuses, but he's okay with it because I guess he just likes being
on TV.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's just a guy who used to work at Arby's, so it's a step up, I guess.
I
would say so.
I don't know. I guess.
He seems to
I
kind
think
of
working
enjoy
at
it.
Arby's. Yeah, I think working at Arby's is probably worse than being tortured by a mad scientist.
I would tend to agree with that, I suppose.
I think it's also worth noting that as their creator, Joel is kind of seen by the bots as their father figure. Though they don't explicitly say that, it's just like their dynamic is the bots they might poke fun at him once in a while, but there's so many like teachable moments that they have together that Joel will end up like kind of be like, oh, gather round. Well, you need to know that, blah, 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 blah. So he's always like kind of teaching them a lesson, and they really look up to him.
Wait. That explain to me a teachable moment for these robots on the satellite.
Well, it all comes from bits, don't you see?
Yeah, well, imagine too, like, so there are the host segments that are in between, like they kind of cut up the movie that they're making fun of. Usually they will like relate to the part of the movie that they just saw. So like in one of them, there's a giant monster that's running around that's like a giant human eyeball. And then the robots are like, Joel, how come people are afraid of giant human eyeballs? And they're like, oh, well, you see, humans can't just take their body parts out and put them back in like you guys can. So, if we see like a big disembodied head, we're pretty scared of that, even though, Tom Servo can take his head off and be just fine.
It's a lot of small things like that. I mean, they're always doing some sort of what I would describe as a skit.
Yeah.
And like they're like doing it for no one but like the mad scientists who will oftentimes comment on what they're doing.
And like the mad scientists, the mads tend to, it's not that they don't know that the robots exist, but they almost always just kind of ignore them. Like they will talk to Joel specifically, but they almost never interact with the actual like robots.
Yeah, I mean they know they're there. They're not there to talk to them. They're there to talk to Joel.
Yeah. But they're definitely like, they'll do stuff with like, if it's like a Christmas episode or something like that, they'll, it's definitely that dynamic of like Joel is teaching them all the meaning of Christmas or whatever, and they're like not really getting it, like they're just kind of goofing on stuff the whole time. So it's not like a super serious relationship, but the robots definitely do like not even like respect him really, because they always do that.
I would say they do.
Like, they do.
They
care
do
about
in
him,
comparison.
but they all razz each other a bunch. You know how it is.
what I was going to say to kind of lead us into the next segment of talking about Mystery Science Theater is that Joel eventually escapes the Satellite of Love and is replaced by another host named Mike. And the robots do have a different relationship with Mike compared to Joel. Because Joel is their creator, and like we were saying...
You're not my dad.
I mean, like we were saying, they have like this kind of like... almost... they have a respect for him and like look to him for answers about the human experience in most cases. Whereas Mike, who is the second host of Mystery Science Theater, is more like their older brother in a way.
Yeah.
And they do not respect him as much because there is a notable difference between Joel and Mike, and the robots really make fun of Mike much, much, much more.
And so as like to relate this to the real world, Joel is a very deadpan guy. He says everything very like monotone, and I mean, because he does like prop comedy, like the joke is kind of the thing he's holding. It's not necessarily him telling the joke. And that's just how he does comedy. So he is, he definitely is leaning into that. But then by the time we get to Mike, Mike was one of the head writers of the show and would often appear in skits. Like Lizzie was saying, a lot of people had to just like do their bits. But he is definitely more of a like comedian in delivery kind of guy. He's got, I think probably what most people would see as like traditional charisma. And so he's a lot more like spirited when he's talking and stuff like that. And so the robots, I think, give him a lot more, give him a lot more guff because he's got the kind of personality that handles that a little bit better, where it would feel a lot more mean if you did it to Joel, because Joel's already just kind of like, hey guys,
Joel is also very passive to the Mads, like with the fact that they have trapped him in this kind of horrible situation and torture him.
Yeah.
And he's always really excited to do the invention exchange and stuff like that. Whereas Mike, in comparison, is pretty much always trying to fight them about like being locked there and like expressly wants to leave. But Joel was never like that.
Yeah. So
are you two Joel fans or Mike stans?
I like Joel.
I have to say I much prefer Mike. I do like Joel, but it's like, and I'm sure this is very divisive for people who love this show, but like, it's just, Mike is so much better of a host to me just because of that charisma.
Well,
but like nothing beats the charm of the original creator being in it also.
And so as a point of order for the show, the invention exchanges themselves, because they basically existed as a way for Joel to feature his prop comedy, they do eventually become phased out as Mike takes over the show, as Mike is not a prop comic and does not seem to be interested in doing prop comedy. And within the show itself, Joel is seen as like a inventor capable of like making robots and stuff like that, whereas Mike does not seem to be able to really make anything of substance.
Mike is not as smart as Joel.
Yeah, at least not when it comes to
Mike.
Yeah, at least not when it comes to tech stuff.
Well, like Joel worked at Gizmonic Institute despite being a janitor, but Mike is also kind of like just some guy, and he was a temp at Gizmonic Institute.
Yeah.
So he is at like a different level of Joel.
So what the actual like handoff event was, TV's Frank and Dr. Forrester were doing their experiments as per usual. Eventually, TV's Frank just dies.
TV's Frank is there for Mike. He doesn't die when Joel leaves.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
but,
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's a fun fact. TV's Frank just dies canonically.
Yeah,
we'll come back to that.
So, at one point, GPC goes over to Joel, and then she's like, "Okay, this is This is going to like require some like more real world explanation stuff, but she says that she was going through their inventory and that she found a bunch of cans of hamdingers like in a big crate with an escape pod. And Joel's like, "Wait, we have an escape pod?" But we need to go back because she said the word
hamdingers.
We said the word hamdingers. And so I needed to know what hamdingers
Most people
are.
would just be like, okay, whatever that is. But
So,
CJ was like, now what is that?
Hamdingers are a real thing. They were manufactured in Cudahy, Wisconsin, in like the 70s and 80s. And they are like a Spam kind of thing. It is a can of 8
Circles.
ham patties.
Oh.
Pre-cooked ham patties in a can.
Oh, God.
And I guess it is
my
a
God.
thing that 70s kids in Wisconsin specifically would have grown up eating.
Everything comes down to the weirdest most niche Wisconsin things.
And they're called hamdingers, like humdingers, but with ham.
Hamdingers. And those were
please
apparently
move on.
on the Satellite of Love.
Yeah, they had them on the satellite.
Like a
of love.
lot. They had a pile of them.
They had a crate full, and apparently within that crate, GPC found an escape shuttle. And then Joel goes, "Oh, there's an escape shuttle? Cool, then I can just escape."
Then I can just leave.
And then he does.
And he does.
And that is how.
And that is how Joel's era comes to an end.
Right.
Except he continues to write for the show,
Right.
but his
in
era's
the
a
real
host.
in the real world, he still does a lot of show running stuff, but he kind of gave up the host role because he thought that he wanted to have someone more charismatic.
Well,
run the show.
there's been a couple reasons put out there on the internet as to why Joel stopped hosting, and I'm sure it's honestly just a combination of all of them. Because one reason was Joel knew he wasn't the best host, like he didn't have the energy for it, and he felt should be replaced. And another reason was Joel had other creative projects he wanted to do. And then the third reason I heard was that Joel had too much back and forth with the producer of the show, Jim Mallon, who is also one of the former voices of GPC.
Okay,
And maybe it's
yeah.
all of those things.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're pretty used to this kind of thing. It's basically the same as when Steve left Blue's Clues when he found that escape
it's like
pod.
literally exactly like that. and they had to be like, "Hey kids, this is my cousin."
Yeah.
I can't remember who immediately replaced Steve.
You guys remember there was in like middle school, and
Steve
then you
went
were
out-
talking about
Steve
it was
went
like,
to
he died
college.
of drugs, like he had a drug problem.
Oh,
and
poor
he was-
Steve. He just had
Yeah.
cancer.
He did just have cancer kind of recently, but he never had a drug problem. That was just a
Well,
thing someone made up.
Yeah, I know.
No, well, the crazy thing is, like, people said that he had cancer before because
Right.
he shaved his head, but he was like, "No, I was just going bald,
I
so I
just
shaved my
said
head."
that.
But now he
He
does,
does
have
have
cancer.
cancer. It was the same thing as like Macaulay Culkin, and they're like, "Oh my God, he's on meth now," and he's like, "Nah, I've
No.
never done meth. I just look like this."
I just look like this is what I am.
Oh, well, Joel
I
didn't
have
get
a
that
band
treatment.
I have a band about pizza, which is kind of like being on
Just-
meth, but
yeah, it's kind of strange. And then so Mike enters the show, like Lizzie said, he was just an intern, but they do
He was a
basically the
temp.
same. Yeah. But they do basically the same thing where they kidnap him and put him on a rocket and put him back on the Satellite of Love. And so he is also trapped there as their new test experiment.
And then the intro changes to, because it used to be that he can't control when the movies begin or end because he used those special parts to make his robot friends. And it changes to he'll have to keep his sanity with the help of his robot friends.
Right. So in most of the seasons, at least where there's like actual changes in the cast of the show, they do a new intro, and they usually have new words for the intro that will describe more accurately what's going on at this.
It's why
particular
you can
point.
watch this show. You can jump in anywhere because they literally tell you everything you need to know when you listen to the intro, which is also probably why so many people who like this show don't actually couldn't tell you the real plot because they're like, well, they tell you it in the intro.
Yeah.
with the transition to Mike, a couple other things eventually happen. TV's Frank does die, as we previously mentioned, and it's like just kind of sudden. And it, again, the real world reason was that actor was leaving the show, and
that's better than the actor died.
No, nothing happened to him.
he's
He just
fine.
left the show. TV's Frank, he ascended into second banana heaven, which is the place that all sidekicks go.
Yeah.
And like, I've seen this episode. Like, it's really just he gets like a fortune that tells him his death is imminent at like the beginning of the episode, and then the end of the episode he just dies.
Yeah.
And it's like he's ascended by the angel Torgo, which is a reference to a movie that is like was made famous by this show. This is just a side fun fact, but there's a movie that is everyone just collectively agrees is the worst movie they have shown on Mystery Science Theater 3000 that also got so much notoriety from this that it now appears on like the worst movies of all time lists. Like, it's always at least near the top, if not number one.
Yeah.
And it's called Manos Hands of Fate, or like the Hand of Fate, something like that. And they like fully embrace that they helped make this movie like known to the world, and they specifically bring this character Torgo back in multiple episodes for skits. So Torgo is a character in the movie that is just like this bizarre, like kind of like Igor type character, like a classic mad scientist Igor character that's just weird old man that serves a dark master. And they just really latched onto that. So Torgo comes to ascend TV's Frank, and he is dead. And he never comes back in the show. But
he's dead now.
But in order to keep the formula of having two Mads versus the host and their bots, they bring on, to replace TV's Frank, Pearl Forrester, who is Dr. Forrester's mom. And
it is it is heavily implied that Pearl and TV's Frank had some sort of fling.
Yeah,
like,
they had a relationship.
They're
like good friends, at least.
Yeah, sure. That historians would say that they
Historian
were
would
good
call them
friends.
good friends.
Yeah.
Well, so, and it's very like stereotypical. Like Dr. Forrester is very resentful of his mother and really cites her for the reason why he is an evil scientist. And
important to note, Pearl Forrester is also a mad evil scientist.
Yes.
So she also is worthy of the title of Mads. But yeah, it flips the dynamic, because before Dr. Forrester would like be beating up on TV's Frank, and now his mother is just bullying him, talking about what a waste of space he is. And now he is now the second banana in this relationship.
Yes.
Oof, that's
so
rough.
to the point that season 8 sees the actor who plays Dr. Forrester leave. So obviously we have to have some reason why Dr. Forrester is no longer in the show, to be replaced by his mother Pearl.
You will never know.
You would never guess what happens to
how
to
they
Clayton.
remove him.
He
does not.
Do you want to
die.
give it a go?
Sure.
Well, he does
yeah.
die
I mean,
eventually, but
Well, right,
how
but-
does he get removed initially?
I mean, my initial guess is just that the terribleness of having your mother doing the same job as you but telling you about how awful you are at it made him just seek a different career. Did he go to work at Arby's?
No.
Did he decide that one was better?
No.
No, it's better than that. So at the end of season 7, it's revealed that Dr. Forrester, who is always presumably on like had like a tenuous relationship with the rest of Gizmonic Institute, which you know from the beginning because they're always in Deep 13, which is the 13th basement of Gizmonic Institute, which is they're forced to be down there for all of their experiments.
Which Joel says is highly radioactive because it is very close to Gizmonic Institute's nuclear piles.
But anyway, he, at the end of season 7, reveals that he has officially lost all funding and he's going to have to pack up and leave and move in with his mother.
Yeah, so he's lost funding for the Mystery Science Theater 3000 experiment.
And
Okay.
while he's packing up to leave, he kind of has a unique experience in which he's like visited by a sentient video cassette player, which turns him into a space baby.
Yeah.
Which is just a baby.
He reverts to a space baby.
And Pearl is really happy because she's like, great, I'm going to raise Clayton again, and I'm going to raise him the right way this time so that he doesn't become a mad scientist. Which I don't really know why, because she's also a mad scientist, she's like, I'm going to raise him to be better now.
Okay, firstly, I would not have guessed that.
Yeah.
And secondly, I was not getting the vibe from Pearl that she was the kind of person who would say, I think it was my parenting that really went wrong here, so I'll give it another go.
Well, guess what happens with the beginning of season 8? You'll never guess.
I tried last time. I'm not going to try again.
You'll truly never guess. So
okay.
So I'm not totally sure how, but at the when season 8 starts, Pearl is revealed to have cryogenically frozen herself. Mm-hmm. So she could survive far into the future. Mm-hmm. And she wakes back up on Earth in the year 2525. And she kind of throws away what happened to Clayton. And she's like, well, I tried to raise him right, but it wasn't really working. So I smothered him with a pillow and killed him. So she killed him. And that's the in-universe explanation of why they didn't bring him back as a child.
Yeah. So there's some important stuff that happens in there. At the end of Dr. Forrester's funding, he decides to just end the MST 3000 experiment. So the experiment is tethered to the planet Earth by a really long cable.
It's called the umbilicus.
And when the experiment is brought to an end by the doctor because he lost his funding, he untethers the satellite of love, and it floats off into space. And then so for a while, instead of being in the satellite of love, which is somewhere in orbit around the Earth, it is flying through all of time and space. And Pearl is attempting to reclaim it because she wants to take up the experiment for her own.
So despite killing him, she did promise to keep the experiments going to him. So her morality is all over the place.
The thing that is just not sitting right with me here is that this is as crazy as plenty of the other shit that we talk about, but you guys are describing it so matter-of-factly.
It's pretty simple to follow.
It's a very Joel method of storytelling.
Well, so this is a fun fact that's a real-world fun fact. The reason why there's more to what happens starting in season 8, and we'll get to that. To preface this, though, season 8 starts when the show started airing on the Sci-Fi Channel. Before season 8, it was airing on the Comedy Channel. Comedy Central. And so when they moved to the Sci-Fi Channel, somebody at Sci-Fi must have been like, you need more sci-fi plot in this show. Which is, I guess, the reason about why they add all of this extra insanity that I don't know if you are ready for.
I just am absolutely not ready.
I mean, we already started off with
pretty tame so
Clayton
far.
was killed by his own mother off screen.
Becoming a star baby. Yeah.
And she cryogenically froze herself so she could seek revenge in the future. She woke up in year 2525 to the Earth, a la Planet of the Apes, being run by a bunch of very sentient monkeys. And she just like became their leader. In her words, the lawgiver to the sentient apes.
Wait, what year does she wakes up in 2025?
2525.
25.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, that 2,525. I could see that happening in the next couple of years.
2 years, sentient apes rise up against us.
And that's when she gives us the throwaway that, like, she's like, yeah, I killed my son, by the way. And
yeah, I mean, sometimes you have a dud, you know.
So this
what can you do?
Season 8, though, features her flying around the time and space, chasing Mike Nelson and the bots on the Satellite of Love, and inexplicably she's in a Volkswagen, like the little bus.
Volks bus.
And it's called the Widowmaker. That's her spaceship.
This is the name of her ship. But she is trying to chase down the Satellite of Love so that she can continue the experiment, which is, again, all flying through time and space.
Again, yes, there's so much time jumping that happens the rest of the series. It's good they did preface that, like, okay, we're just going, rogue on time.
And so also the experiment is pointless at this point because there's no more humans to take over. There's just monkeys on Earth.
Well, don't worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, like it
which they already worship her,
well, so
right?
Listen, I think she's just doing it out of like again,
out of love for her son that she smothered.
She's doing it out of respect for the son she killed. So
okay, yeah, that lands. So can you just tell me how many total seasons are we looking at? Because we're 8 in. I want to know how much time we're gonna increase the insanity over.
There's 13 seasons.
There's 13
okay.
Seasons.
And it was on the Sci-Fi Channel season 8 through season 10.
Okay.
So not a long time.
Yeah, not a long time, but a lot happened. Because so again, the further, does it even matter why they're doing these experiments anymore? The Earth is blown up in 2525 by Mike Nelson, the host, on accident.
On accident, he blows up the Earth that's now inhabited by sentient apes.
Well, as long as it was an accident,
It wasn't malicious. He's not evil. He's just kind of clumsy.
I mean, more specifically, it was destroyed by a group of bomb-worshipping mutants.
Right.
But it comes back to Mike Nelson.
How is that Mike's fault?
I don't know. I don't know. I actually didn't look that up. I'm not totally sure. I just know that that's a fact, that Mike Nelson is responsible for the destruction of Earth and more. Because as we follow season 8, Pearl left Earth before it was destroyed. Little did she know she had a stowaway in her Widowmaker whose name is Professor Bobo, and he is a person in a monkey costume. And Bobo eventually becomes he's basically becomes like, the TV's Frank to Dr. Forrester, to Pearl. But also, that's not enough. They're going to add a third mad host.
Oh, finally.
Because they also stop by another planet and they discover this alien race of omnipotent beings called the Observers. And Mike Nelson destroys their planet again.
Okay.
However,
Well,
not before they
okay.
do get someone.
Accidentally blow up a planet once.
Yeah, Mike.
Shame.
I mean, he does it more than once. He's not as smart as Joel. You see, he's not as tech savvy, so he keeps making all these accidents when he tries to do something that is tech related.
No, I don't know if I buy this. It's like
Mike is Death Destroyer of Worlds, literally.
Yeah, it's like, we've seen plenty of those goofy, articles that are like, oh, the janitor hears a beeping alarm he doesn't like and he destroys 10 years worth of scientific data or whatever.
Oh, relevant.
Yeah. When you hear that one once, it's like, okay, that's
that guy
crazy,
was Mike
but I
Nelson.
guess that happened. If he did that a second time, then it's not an accident anymore.
It's like kind of okay because the observers, is my understanding, because I didn't really see the episodes where there were more of these guys, but I don't think they are a kind alien race.
No, they seem to be malicious.
They're malicious.
The observers are, I mean, I think they're based on the Marvel comic observers of the same.
They definitely are.
But they imply that they are super intelligent, but like all of their actions are to the contrary. All of them are basically like blue brains inside of a bowl. And
they have like people carrying around that bowl.
So they identify as the brains, like they say that they are the brains in the bowl. And they speak through these like humanoid hosts that are carrying their bowl around, that they seem to just be like
a puppet.
That seems to be their body, but they insist that they don't have bodies, that they are just the brains. And whenever someone mentions that they have bodies holding up their brains, they go, no, we don't. So
and to describe the look of the observers, so it's like people who are painted all white with like black around their eyes, and then they're wearing like a purple cape and hood, and then they're holding these brains.
And like some of the observers, like one of the observers is also Mike Nelson. Like he is dressed up like that, so he's in face paint, so
they don't have many.
Harder to tell.
It's not actually him in the show. It's just the actor.
Right. Is there something wrong with Midwestern creators? Is that just kind of like
we get bored and we just come up with weird shit.
So the observers, they were all destroyed with the exception of one who becomes again like a sidekick to Pearl, and they just call him Brain Guy.
Yeah.
So Pearl now has two sidekicks, Professor Bobo and Brain Guy. Apparently, canonically, the rest of the observers, they didn't die. They just got like blown to another version of Earth, I guess, because the 2525 one was exploded, but they went to another version of Earth and became Wisconsinites.
Yeah.
That's canonically what happened to them.
And spent the rest of their life rooting for the Green Bay Packers.
So those are just all small details of things that are happening in season 8.
So like also like there was a different ape professor named Dr. Peanut who was the assistant to Professor Bobo. They worked in Deep Ape, which is like Deep 13, but it's the ape version of that. But during the explosion, he was sent back in time, and then he's the one who creates the race of ape people to start with. So the reason that the world got taken over by ape people is because one of the ape people got sent back in time to create the ape uprising.
My favorite part about all of this lore is that it so does not matter to anything.
they just all like talk about it and just move on.
These are just things that happen, more like, in the show.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way you could get away with 13 seasons of this stuff, right? Is that this is all background to making fun of bad movies from the 70s.
We're just making fun of bad old movies. That's what this show's about. Well, eventually, going into season 9, they do catch the satellite of love again, and they tether it back down to another Earth, and where Pearl lives in a castle called Castle Forrester. She lives there with Professor Bobo and Brain Guy, and they continue the experiments. They just tether the satellite of love to their castle and send him the bad movies. So all of that in season 8 just kind of built up to shenanigans with Pearl and Bobo and Brain Guy just being in a castle together, sending Mike movies. And that's basically all you need to say about it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did this for many years, Ethan.
They did that in season 9 and season 10. When eventually the final episode of season 10, Pearl accidentally breaks the satellite of love and it's sent spiraling down to Earth.
Sure are a lot of accidental destructions
there's a lot of
happening.
accidental destruction.
Yeah, everyone in the show is kind of not super smart. Like,
they're all stupid.
None of them are like.
Joel was by far like the smartest person on the show, and he never returns. And there's no one who gets like at a higher level than Joel.
But also he was like they had an escape pod in the spaceship he was trying to escape from, and he just didn't look
know
for it.
Well, I guess Mike is the one who more implies that like he just doesn't know what's all on the satellite of love.
Yeah.
Like, I think they have rooms, and they come to the room where they talk to the Mads, but, like, they just don't explore it otherwise, because they always seem surprised that the Satellite of Love has something that it has for that specific bit they're going to do.
Yeah.
The only thing that they know for sure that they refer to is rocket number 9, which is a rocket on the Satellite of Love that has a camera that points outward into space. Mm-hmm. So you can see if like there's something outside.
So they'll have like guest segments in the style of like Space Ghost, where people will just be flying by in whatever spaceship they have, and then they'll just talk to them for like a quick interview or whatever. But it's like all in character as like either a character from the movie they're watching or as just like some wacky thing they came up with that they decided that they wanted to do a bit with.
Well, but anyway, the Satellite of Love comes down to crash to Earth, and
all good things must eventually end.
Come to an end, including Pearl really kind of treats it as like whatever, and she like Mike has more like I don't know, worry and upset for like her experiment than she seems to care about, because he's like saying like, but the experiment, Pearl, we're crashing, you're gonna lose everything. And she's like, she says, quote, "Look, Nelson, move on. I am." And she goes on, in her words, to become the dictator of Qatar, the country.
Yeah. And
the real life country.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
And
yeah.
The Satellite of Love crash lands in Wisconsin near Milwaukee.
Obviously.
Where Mike Nelson is able to finally escape.
But this is not the end of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
It was the end for a long time.
It was the end for a long time. So another real world fun fact, Mystery Science Theater 3000 came to an end after the Sci-Fi Channel run, and Joel, the original creator, did think that people still wanted to watch Mystery Science Theater 3000, which he was correct about, and so he took it into his own hands and did a Kickstarter to make more Mystery Science Theater. And when that was done, which was like the teens, the mid 2000s, that Kickstarter ended up being the highest grossing Kickstarter for TV and film category.
Oh.
So it was clearly like, yeah, absolutely, make more. It raised $5 million, close to $6 million.
That doesn't seem like an amount of money that they needed
Well-
for the thing they were
Well,
doing.
what they were really doing was it was more of like a proving to someone that people want more so that someone else would pick them up.
Yeah.
Right.
And it worked because Netflix picked up Mystery Science Theater 3000, and that's where
Sure.
we get seasons 11 and 12.
How long ago was this? This was that era when like Netflix was like, we will make anything if we think people want to see
yeah,
it.
It was in that era, yeah.
Well, yeah, it wasn't that. It was season 11 came out on Netflix in 2017, I believe. So not that
Okay,
long ago.
Yeah.
And then they did have a season 2 that was shorter because the first season was like 14 episodes and season 2 was 6. And then just to jump ahead, that also then was canceled by Netflix. And Joel, yet
Right.
again, and also being correct, said, I think people still want to watch Mystery Science Theater. And he again went to Kickstarter and this time raised $7 million, almost 8. And this time created season 13, which is 12 episodes, and this is independently made.
So this is distributed through
okay.
their own platform, which is called the Gizmoplex.
The Gizmoplex. So that was
Okay.
so that's the modern era of
They seem to have
of Mystery
retained the
Science Theater.
rights to all of their shows, which is pretty impressive. Because
Yeah, that's neat.
now like Lizzie said, the only way to see the shows, unless you watch them on TV or a TV-like service, so we use Pluto TV. But like you can't get it on any streaming service. The only way to get it is either to see it on TV because it's licensed through a station, or to go and like buy or rent it from their actual website. And that
They also have some free ones on YouTube. If you
Yeah.
are interested in Mystery Science Theater 3000, you can just go watch an episode on YouTube that's hosted by them.
Yeah. And it's really great.
Yeah, I mean, this is again just more real world stuff, but I think something about Mystery Science Theater that's really great is that from the very beginning of the show, they encouraged people to tape the show to save it, and like rewatch and show your friends. And that is cited as being the reason why the show is so it's like they still have all of the episodes. Apparently there is only one lost episode of Mystery Science Theater, and it's because there was this huge like community they made out of encouraging people to tape their shows. And I think that's great. And apparently they still to this day reference like, if you got to see it, you got to see it, you know, watch it however, though we do need money to make it. So you should, if you do want to watch Mystery Science Theater, you should give money to them since they're on their own at this point. But they had a secret phrase that they would always say to each other in like real world settings, which is keep circling the tapes, which is just about keep passing around the taped episodes of Mystery Science Theater because it's one of the main reasons this show has stayed alive. But
Yeah,
it's super cool in this day and age where so many people are so like, you know, anti that. I mean, corporation-wise, that they're like, you can only watch it on our streaming service, and we can take it away at any time, and it will just be gone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's an interesting show in general because the era from which it takes a lot of the movies it's riffing on is like an era of just lost media nowadays, you know?
Yeah, I think they have also noted that there is a chance that some of the movies that are shown on Mystery Science Theater could end up being like, that's the only copy we have.
Yeah.
I don't know
Right.
if any of them are like that currently, because the reason why they can even show these movies are that they buy the copyright to them. So like having made them, surely they, I mean, especially in more modern versions, surely they like own it in some capacity. that they'd hang on to. But I would say there's definitely a huge chance that as we go forward in time, Mystery Science Theater 3000 will be the only thing preserving some of these horrible old movies.
Yeah. No, I saw similar things. The fucking Wu-Tang Clan is one of the primary preservers of old kung fu movies.
Yeah.
Oh.
And they have like a ton of them that they like putting money into finding the old VHS copies and stuff like that. They're the only reason that we still have some of these shitty old kung fu movies.
A lot of media is not lost thanks to people who just taped something they saw on TV.
Right. It is not known, though, where it is, which does make it lost. But that doesn't mean it can't be found again.
True. Well,
Riffed on by a couple of robots with a genius inventor or some guy.
Or some guy.
Or some guy. As we went into season 11 and 12 and 13, they did get movies that are really more modern to us now, because when they started making this show in the 90s, surely those movies that they made, that they were riffing on, that a lot of them were from like the 70s.
Right. There were
Right.
a lot of black
Some
and white
people might have
films.
even like recognized them, to be honest. And not that I've ever recognized. Well, there is one movie they have riffed on in the modern era that I did know before Mystery Science Theater 3000. The Netflix era, they covered a movie called Atlantic Rim, which is a notorious ripoff of Pacific Rim.
It's
And
pretty,
That
it's
sounds pretty
really
good.
good.
it's
I'm
pretty
sure.
bad. I watched it. I mean, I've seen the actual movie, and then I've also seen the Mystery Science Theater episode on it. And yeah, I think also like I don't know. I definitely like YouTubers have done videos on it before. Like it's a very memeable movie. But yeah, going into the modern era, they do tend to have a lot more modern movies that they're riffing off of, which is a lot harder these days, I would imagine, because most of the time when you make a movie, it's either like people like it and it's good, or it's just so boring it's not even like funny to talk about. But there's a couple ones every once in a while that fit in there, and I'm not talking about the meme movies like Cocaine Bear that are supposed to be like that on purpose.
Right.
Which defeats the whole.
Yeah, like they can't do any of the sci-fi original movies where they were like purposely trying to be bad, like Sharknado.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they also just have the problem that for modern movies, there's so much competition and people memeing on them, you know?
I've
It's like
thought
if-
of that, yes.
Yeah, if 20 years from now they decide to meme on like Morbius, people are going to be like, well, I remember all of these jokes from back in the day. This isn't really
Yeah.
new ground covered.
At least for now, seasons 11 through 13, the more modern era of Mystery Science Theater, it did see a lot of updates besides the movies being a little more recent on average. They also got a new host. His name is Jonah this time. And however, same robots as always, same satellite of love. But wait, didn't it crash? It was rebuilt by our new mad scientist. Her name is Kinga Forrester. And she is the daughter of Dr. Clayton Forrester and granddaughter of Pearl Forrester. So we're continuing a family line here of mad scientists hosting.
Why
Mystery
is
Science
she
Theater.
doing this? She is Ecuadorian royalty or whatever.
So
Well, that's a good question, Ethan.
Kinga is just as Clayton was different from Pearl, and Kinga is different from those two in that she's still considered a mad scientist, but instead of trying to take over the world, she is profit driven.
Yeah, she seems to be mostly interested in monetization.
So she So the setup to the Netflix era, which is season 11 and 12, is Jonah is a worker at Gizmonic Institute. He is described as being, by other Gizmonic Institute workers, as kind of like a really cool guy. He doesn't always do things by the book, but that kind of makes him cooler because he always gets it done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's like, again, just kind of a
dork.
guy.
He's definitely like a dork.
He's a little dork.
His job, his role is he's basically a semi-driver, but in space. He's transporting a bunch of asteroids to Earth.
A payload, as they refer to it.
Yeah. And then Kinga is in charge of she oversees the recreation of the satellite of love, and the restart of the MST3K experiment. And on top of all of that, she now needs a test subject. And so just like all the other test subjects, she basically just waited until someone kind of came around close by to the satellite of love, which happened to be Jonah, and they trick him into entering the satellite of love, and then they trap him where he meets up with all of the robots that we have known so far.
They were just there.
They were just there also. They don't ever explain why the robots are always just there, but they still are.
They still are. Well,
Sure.
The other thing of note is that Kinga is in space. She is on the dark side of the moon at Moon 13, which is her base.
So
the satellite of love is like tethered to Moon 13.
So now instead of Deep 13 or Ape 13, we
It's
have Moon 13.
Or Castle Forrester, briefly.
Yes. And same kind of formula. They all kind of make fun of Jonah, the robots.
It's a similar relationship that Mike had with them.
Right.
Except the difference is that Jonah is more of an inventor than Mike was. So the invention exchange
So
comes
we got
back.
prop comedy
Yep.
back.
The invention exchange has come back. Jonah also makes a few extra robot companions. They never catch on as like hosts
The
because
other robots hate them.
the original robots all hate them. But they do show up every once in a while. And
Just to like the groans of the other robots, like,
yeah.
like, they just don't like them.
And Jonah is again, the reason that they're experimenting on Jonah is because they are trying to like monetize
They're trying to monetize the show.
Right, the actual show. So the MST3K experiment is now about making MST3K and selling it, which again is a reflection of the real world thing that was happening at that point where they were trying to fund and create the show again.
Kinga like literally says like her plan is to like revitalize this franchise and make so much money she gets to sell it to Disney, and then she'll make $1 billion.
Yeah. And and so that is why she continues the tradition of having horrible cheesy movies, is because the worse the movie is, the more Jonah and the
views.
robot vamps, and then the more people watch.
Right. Yeah, I mean it is functionally the exact same premise.
Yeah.
It's like but like her motive is it's for the views.
Right.
Which is more modern.
I mean, but again, it's the difference between we would like fascist control over people, so we're creating a torture device, and we would like all of the money, so we're creating TV schlock.
Yeah.
It's
It's been updated.
It's come back around.
I told you it was going to come back around to capitalism.
It's all come back around.
So
Joy.
there's another important real world thing that was happening as well to introduce our last character. The MST3K had a traveling live show that they were doing for a long time. And
What did they do on the traveling live show? They're like,
they
hey
show-
guys,
they
you want to
sh-
watch a movie with me?
yeah, they show
yeah.
a movie and they talk over
They
it.
would
What are you talking
play
about?
a movie and they would have them riffing on
They
it.
would just do the show. Yeah.
And it's just live. puppets.
That's what all live
can
shows
do
are,
it.
Ethan. What are you talking about? The YouTubers do that shit too. What are you gonna do? Play video games? Talk over it? Yeah, that's what they do.
But that's also a reason why Joel was like, okay, people clearly would watch more Mystery Science Theater because they kept doing these
to the live
tours.
shows.
Because they'd come to watch us do it live. Yeah, okay, sure, yeah.
So within the live show, a new character arose.
Well,
and
kind of a few.
Well, yeah, but the main one that it becomes relevant as we get to the last season of the show is Emily, who is a like rigger for the show. She's just like a stagehand, I think.
But like in universe for the
she's
show.
a stagehand for the show. And she is also not super like tech savvy. She's a lot more in line with like a Mike as opposed to a Jonah or a Joel.
They're really the spiritual successors of like Jonah is to Joel as Emily is to Mike, is the way I see it.
And I guess as the live show went on, or maybe as part of the live show, I don't know, I could never find any like footage or anything from the live shows, so it's just all like secondhand accounts. But Emily became an important figure in the live shows. She exists simultaneously to Jonah because she was doing the live shows while they were making the real shows.
In the Netflix era.
In the Netflix era. But because Jonah is on the Satellite of Love and she is also on a Satellite of Love doing her show, they came up with a reason why this is the case. You see, Emily does her show on the Simulator of Love, which is just a virtual reality simulation of the Satellite of Love.
It's supposed to immerse you in the experience of the Satellite of Love.
Right. And so she is also interacting with Tom Servo and Crow,
who are a part of the Simulator.
But they are just simulator versions of Tom Servo and Crow. So they're not the real Tom Servo and Crow.
They're not the real robotic AIs. They're the digital robotic AIs.
Yes. In the Netflix era, Kinga does have a sidekick, as all of them had, which is son of TV's Frank Max.
Yeah.
Formerly, it's TV's son of TV's Frank Max.
Yeah.
And he is genuinely
he is the
Frank's
biological son of TV's
but
Frank.
like not. Apparently, he was made through like Frank's genetic material.
Yeah,
so
it's a bit
almost a clone in a way.
His origins are a bit hazy, but he is confirmed to be the actual son of TV's Frank, and he's played by Patton Oswalt.
I was just gonna say, good old Patton Oswalt. And Max is like basically exactly the same in many ways to TV's Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Except,
I mean, it is Patton Oswalt doing a TV's Frank impersonation.
Yeah, except I would say Max is nicer. He has a kinder spirit than TV's Frank, which was just kind of like stupid.
Well, he's also
guy.
in love with Kinga.
And he's in love with Kinga.
So that's a lot of his motivation.
His motivation is just to do whatever she says because he just loves her. Whereas, Kinga is just profit driven. And this comes to a head where across the Netflix first season, Kinga is always throwing out ideas for how they can boost the ratings and get more views, and eventually comes to, you know what gets views? A wedding. I'm going to forcibly marry Jonah in an episode, and I'm going to make everyone come see it, and it'll be, a huge rating success. And obviously, Max is distraught by this and really wrestles with it throughout the entire season. Jonah obviously is like just a captive to this. Kinga threatens to shut off his oxygen if he does not comply to actually legally marrying her. And they do set up like a whole ceremony and everything. Across the season, they have familiar faces from the old seasons pop in. So Pearl does visit because she is canonically alive, but Kinga is shown to be like she never knew her mom, and she didn't have too much time with her dad. Kinga is really not about her dad. Not that she doesn't like him, but she is so much about living up to Pearl. And she's like obsessed with Pearl and just wants Pearl's attention and Pearl's love, basically. But the times that there's like one time, or there's two times, Pearl pops by in the Netflix series with Bobo and Brain Guy, so apparently she just still hangs out with them.
Yeah, why not?
She's very dismissive of Kinga, and like is kind of like, ugh. And that's very saddening for Kinga, but she has some of that void filled by the fact that Pearl has created a clone of herself. It's actually a failed clone of herself, and her name is Cynthia. So there's a Pearl clone who then hangs out with Kinga to like fill the void of her grandmother, whose attention and love she does not get. However, Cynthia is not like Pearl because she's a failed clone. So while she looks like her, she's like slow and awkward and like doesn't understand like social cues very well, and
I don't know what the transition point was, but at some point this became the writers like working through some stuff.
Well, guess what? They worked through a lot more because, like CJ prefaced, there's like this additional plot added from the live shows that like we can't see. So I haven't seen any of the live shows, but while Emily's on the Simulator of Love in the live shows, apparently her mad scientist was Mega Cynthia, which is a clone of Cynthia, who is a clone of Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
But Mega Cynthia is like meaner and a little closer to actual Pearl. But she's like, I don't know. She looks different. She has like a streak of black in her hair.
She looks like eviler.
Yeah, she looks eviler, I guess.
Does that make her a failed clone or a successful
I don't know
clone?
because I think like they describe her as a combination of Cynthia and Pearl. That's why she's Mega Cynthia. But like I can't really elaborate too much on this because this is like live show lore that I do not have access to. However, they did tie in some of this stuff to season 13, the most recent season. So I guess going off of that, so the end of the first season of the Netflix series, everyone is at Kinga and Jonah's wedding, but Max sabotages it by having like a creature he made come in and eat Jonah.
Yeah, it's like a robotic.
It's like
serpent.
a robot serpent. It looks like it looks like Beetlejuice in a way. Like he got Beetlejuiced, he got eaten by a giant snake.
Yeah,
but it's a robot.
Okay.
And that's how that season ends. And season 12, Jonah literally just like comes into the Satellite of Love and is like, "Oh my god, guys, I'm back." And the bots are like, "Who are you?" He's like, "It's me, Jonah. Don't you want to hear about how I escaped the robot snake and I had this huge battle with it in space?" And they're like, "No, whatever." So it's not really covered, but Jonah's back in season 12. He did not die. And Kinga just kind of continues what she was doing, but is like, well, the wedding didn't work out, but we can still try to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
So she kind of just continues the same as what she was doing. Just goes back to the formula again to end season 12.
I can't even imagine following a formula, bi-weekly and just not getting the traction, but you just keep on plugging away at it. That sounds rough.
Listen, we
should have more invention exchanges, really.
We should. Well, Fran likes it when we do quizzes.
Okay, we should have more host segments. Well, so season 13 is the most recent that was crowdfunded and is now hosted by their brand new company, which I think is called Gizmoplex.
Wait, in the real world?
In the real world.
In the real world, it's called Satellite of Love LLC.
Okay.
But the Gizmoplex is the web portal to get all their stuff.
So, like, just the difficulty of like weaving through the made up names that they use in real life, and for the made up businesses within their fantasy world, and then the regular things in their fantasy world. Yeah.
Who would do that?
Who would ever do that?
Who would make a company named loosely off of the content that they create?
Well, in season 13, at the end of season 12, they everything was destroyed again. The Moon 13 base was destroyed. Mm-hmm. However, season 3 opens that Kinga has rebuilt her moon base, and now it's just Moon 1. And
moving up in the world. She
has changed too. She is kind of doing the same thing, except on a slightly different way. It's not really that different. She has built a movie theater on the moon called the Gizmoplex, and it's the first of its kind. It has a big dome on it called the Kinga Dome, and she's trying to make profit off of that. But the same old thing of, you guys need to watch these movies and be funny riffing off them, so I can make money off of you guys doing this.
It's basically a big streamer house.
So yeah, she's basically created a streamer house.
But now Jonah is there.
But also
Emily is there.
In the Simulator
of Love. And
but she's in the show now, so this is this has gone from live show lore to the actual show.
And then as the season progresses, they have a big season finale time when...
Well, it's not before the season finale.
Yeah, but like leading up to it, they have Joel come back. He is older now because he has aged in the real world.
In the real world.
Wow.
But he is... he's kind of the catalyst for some of the changes on the show as well. Like, he changes Crow's vocal box or whatever. Like, previously in the show, whenever they would get a new puppeteer, it would be canonized by Joel, like, updating one of the robots or like downloading a new personality for them or whatever. He does a similar thing in the show where that's when he like changes Crow to have a new voice. For a while, he resets Tom Servo to his default state, and then he gets his original voice actor back for a little while, playing Tom Servo. He said he's just like from the future, right?
Yeah, so in season 13, Pearl does briefly come to hang out with Kinga for real, so not just her clone self, Cynthia. But
Cynthia's also there.
Cynthia is just also there. Pearl has a time bag, which is like a giant bag that you can travel through time in. And they, citing for ratings reasons, Kinga's like, I got a big surprise. I got a third host, and I had a familiar face go into the time bag and pluck us one of the original hosts. And the familiar face that goes into the time bag is Dr. Earhart. So the original sidekick to Dr. Forrester.
He's returned.
He's returned.
He's been found.
Wow. He said that he wasn't missing. He just went on a journey of self-discovery.
And he discovered he would still like to be an evil mad scientist.
He reveals a lot of weird things that, like, are not touched on again, like the fact that Dr. Forrester willed him his spaceship. So Dr. Earhart is on the spaceship that belonged to Dr. Forrester. And he also apparently is trying to fulfill Dr. Forrester's last wish of spreading his remains on Mirth, which is obviously the planet between Mars and Earth. Mirth.
Right. That one.
That one.
Yeah.
And he apparently they were being stored at Gizmonic Institute, as was somehow TV Frank. Even though TV Frank ascended completely and it didn't seem like anything was left of him, somehow he has remains of TV Frank and Dr. Forrester when he appears again, and he's like, I'm carrying out their last wishes of spreading their remains on Mirth. This is just a detail that he brings up that is not covered again.
Yeah,
but
he's just bringing back all the old
he's doing that, and then he also brings Joel. And he's like, here you go. Here's what you asked for, Kinga. I have one of the old hosts. And Joel says he does not have his robots with him because they were out for a spacewalk, quote unquote, when he was kidnapped by Dr. Earhart. And Joel also says that he is from another version of the future in which he never left the satellite of love. So he's canonically from the year 3000.
Right.
Okay.
This is all, again, just kind of said as like details of what's going on. So,
but then as the show goes on, they are all attempting to escape their different satellites of love.
Joel officially like joins as a host for some episodes then, which is really fun, but they have to give him Emily's versions of the bots from the simulator of love. So that's why they kidnap Emily's bots and put them on Joel's satellite of love, which is different from their other satellite of love where Jonah is on, because this one is from the far future. And it's also like the original set, which is kind of cute.
Right.
But
because the set gets updated every time they get. Well, it was just updated really in the.
But
new
they have
Netflix
to give
series.
him. They have to give him Emily's bots, and that's when they do what CJ was talking about. That Joel's like, "Oh, hey, let me update your voices for you," and they get in the original actors as well to be there with Joel. Which is cute, but it's really funny for them to go to all of this like lore explanation.
And so this is all a big setup because each of the hosts are trying to escape their satellites of love at this point. And so together now they realize that they can all work together because they all have a different expertise, and they all are going to work together so that they can all escape. And so they convince Kinga that the best thing for them to do is for all three of them to host an episode all at the same time. So in the season finale for the most recent season, all three of the hosts, excluding Mike, but all of the hosts that they've had now, all just do an episode together, and it's just the three of them in the movie theater instead of one of them with two robots, and it's really cute, and it's a very good episode, and it's about it's a movie called The Christmas Dragon.
It's very good. It's
really
probably the most
music.
recent movie that they have done, because it looks really, really recently made.
The production value is so high, and all of their hair is so styled.
Bad.
And it like is trying to be the Lord of the Rings,
and
but
like
it's
Narnia.
it's about finding Santa Claus, who's like a warlock. It's pretty. It's a good episode.
It's a very good episode.
Go
genuinely,
out and watch that episode, and then you will.
That sounds amazing.
They have a Jack Sparrow ripoff.
When they do all the host bits, you will know what they are talking about, because now you know all the lore there is to know about Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Real quick, the reason they are able to escape. So season 13 has ended with they did escape. They leave the robots.
Oh.
is apparently they are talking about how they have to say goodbye to the bots.
Yeah.
And they are communicating to each other because like Kinga sees everything because she is like there in the Cambot communication.
Yeah.
So they just like talk to each other in rhyme about their plan to escape. And apparently the Forrester line, with the exception of Pearl, cannot understand people speaking in rhyme.
In prose. So whenever they're explaining how they're going to escape each other and the way they got around the fact that they're talking to Cambot, who is
monitoring
Kinga everywhere, as they were just speaking in rhyme, and then King is like, I don't even know what you guys are saying.
Well, so they do escape, and they escape like with Pearl's aforementioned time bag, and Pearl helps them for like, again, just kind of like whatever. She doesn't. Pearl's very just all over the place.
My granddaughter.
She's
yeah,
chaotic.
Pearl's so all over the place. She's truly like chaotic, neutral in a way. But that's how we leave season 13, which is the most recent season of Mystery Science Theater.
Which is all we've got so far.
Which probably, I bet, won't be the last. I mean, I hope is not the last, to be honest.
I would be pretty surprised if it was over.
As long as someone's out there making shit movies, there will
they will be there
yeah.
to riff on them. And they'll have to keep making nonsense additions to their lore as they go.
It's very good.
When CJ described, he was like, we're going to do Mystery Science Theater 3000 this week. It's just, there's just kind of lore in between the movie stuff. It won't be very long.
It won't be that much. It's fine.
He were wrong.
No, that wasn't that much. But you know what? It is just enough for today because we are at the end of the episode. We want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us yet again. I drew a great deal of inspiration from Mystery Science Theater 3000 for when I was a kid, and it is a show that does mean a lot to me. So I'm glad we got to talk about it. It was a lot of fun.
If you have never seen it, you should definitely check it out. There's some episodes on YouTube for free, and also you can watch it on the Pluto TV streaming service, which is also free. You just have to download the app. They have a 24/7 channel that just plays Mystery Science Theater, including the most recent season, season 13, which is how we've seen it.
We've been falling asleep to it a lot. It's a good show.
It's a good show to put on and chill and maybe fall asleep.
And you can do that with this show. Hey, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how to consume media. Throw it on in the background. I'll make sure to not put any explosion sounds in the outro. Wink.
None of us will ascend into second banana heaven.
No, because we're all first bananas, just like you guys. We of course want to thank Galestorm Kitsune for doing the artwork for our channel, and we want to thank Apajo for doing the intro and outro music to the show. Make sure check us out on YouTube. If you're already at YouTube, give us a thumbs up, put a comment down there, a little virtual smooch. Rate us highly, tell your friends, spread the tapes. That's what they say. And
don't stop circling the tapes.
That's how it goes. Geez, I don't have anything else yet, guys. Do you guys want to sign off? You guys want to do that?
I guess.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm getting from this is that we need to develop our own shtick that explains why we consume terrible media and then explain it to people.
Well,
hey, it's not terrible.
It's for the
sometimes terrible media.
You know how they end.
But if I have to do another Bioshock, oh my god! If they release that stupid fucking Judas game and we're supposed to, no, I don't want to do that.
You know how they end every episode initially it was push the button, Frank, and now it's push the button, Max.
Yep.
So one of us just needs to push the button.
Well,
at the end of the show.
It won't be me because I've been CJ.
Oh, I've been Ethan.
And I've been Liz.
TV's, internet's
and I've
Liz.
been Internet's Lizard X Lizard.
Oh my gosh.
Push the button, Liz.
Button, Lizard X Lizard.